Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall, Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial Group, Rydan Investments, and Encore Business Group. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 to 9 Eastern on Jethro FM.
Coming back here with Bryce Simon. Always like having his insights on the show. Yeah, Bryce, I was trying to do this with the transaction so far, and the offseason's not over, and there's a lot of things to be decided. But with a team that has a young core and had a great year last year, and then seeing what happened with those finals teams, seeing two teams that were more kind of core oriented and not let's acquire all of these stars and play NBA 2K25 or whatever and get all of the stars on the team. We're going to build the core and have more of a team aspect, have a lot of two-way players on both of those teams. I want to kind of get your assessment of what you thought of the offseason. Obviously had the unfortunate break of the Malik Beasley thing, and you talked about how that was a historic three-point shooting season. But one thing I try to look at when somebody exceeds expectations by so much, some of these other guys, it's like if you had gotten, where would you have put Duncan Robinson versus Malik Beasley at the beginning of last season? Yep. Where would we have looked? The situation on the Heat was not as favorable for Duncan, and when it was more favorable, he had some better shooting seasons. I have to imagine putting him by Cade and having all those screens that Duran and Stewart are going to set for him, that's going to improve his splits, I think.
Yeah, first and foremost, I do want to say I think this young core has earned the right to stay together and find out more about them, at least until the trade deadline. I say that because I want the listeners to understand where I come from when I'm evaluating this offseason from Trajan Langdon. I was going to this offseason with essentially the kind of run it back mentality. Now, I said, you don't have to run it back with the exact same players. You can make little tweaks here. You can replace this guy with that guy, whatever. But I wasn't really in for a huge move unless, there was a few very specific names that I was like, okay, well, if you can get that guy and it's not a king's ransom, okay, I would understand making it then. But in general, I was, give me 50 more games. I want to see what J.I. looks like. I want to see if J.D. can continue to improve and grow and be consistent with what we saw down the stretch last year. I want to see a star with all of the things we've already talked about. So that's where I'm coming from with the offseason. I mean, I have a hard time being upset about it because they didn't choose not to bring back Malik Beasley, right? By all accounts, they were going to bring him back. It sounded like there was an offer on the table that I assume he probably would have taken. And then at the last second, that gets just taken off the board. This is not a possibility anymore. And they pivot. And here's how I look at it with Duncan Robinson, Malik Beasley. You said it perfectly. Are you telling me that what we know about Duncan Robinson as a floor spacer, as a shooter, as a movement guy, he can't replicate? I don't know if Beasley was going to be able to replicate what he did anyway. It was truly historic three-point shooting season. And I just find it hard to believe that Duncan Robinson isn't going to be able to provide the same type of floor spacing and shot making that Beasley did. Is he going to make 300 threes? I think it'd be crazy to predict that. But I think you brought in a pretty high volume, not in his history, a good shooter, percentage-wise, volume-wise, all of that. I'm okay with it. And at the end of the day, it's not like Beasley was a big-time defender. Obviously, Duncan isn't either. I think under the circumstances, and here's the other thing, that contract is essentially a one-year deal. It's only $2 million guaranteed in year 2 and non-guaranteed in year 3. So if he doesn't have the season you want or somehow has a huge regression, you get out from under it and you move on.
And that's a key for the way they're doing it, which I personally love. They're not attaching, they're not leveraging their future on any of this stuff. Like you said, they're building that core, and I'm very much of that mindset, because I think this is a good enough core with some development to be one of the leading teams in the Eastern Conference. We have to see how these guys improve, but it's I think you kind of hit on it with the Duncan Robinson thing. You put Duncan Robinson with Cade, finding him in the right spots with those screen setters, because I'm a big one. I like watching the big guys set screens, and Durant and Stewart both set great off-ball screens, and I think that's going to free up Robinson big time for some of those guards to find him. You mentioned the Ivy thing. I feel like these are a couple things that I say on the show often, but this group didn't really ostensibly play together all healthy last year, because Thompson was still reconditioning and Ivy got hurt. And so there was not the healthy core was not together at all. And they still had a pretty darn good season. And so you play that with what you have now. And yeah, I think it's easy to say, hey, just the young guys improving, them all playing together at the same time, and then maybe even just holding court with those veteran pieces. Is one person going to replace Beasley? No, maybe not. But they added LeVert. I think Lanier could factor into a degree, although he's a rookie. We talked about the improvement of some of the other guys, but it'll be interesting to watch them, to your point, and see what they have, and then make the decisions from there. Because the other thing that I've said pretty frequently since it happened, Houston and Detroit were in similar positions to me. I know Houston was a little bit higher up as far as the record and the standing in the conference, but they had a young core. They were on the rise. They were putting a lot of pieces together. They got the right coach, all of those things. I don't like the Durant move at all. I will eat that later in the year if it ends up working out. I'm fine with that. I know I am counter to what a lot of people are saying, but I am glad they're sticking to the young core and waiting to make that swing, because I don't think that's going to go well in Houston, even though I recognize the kind of player that Durant is, and I know they have a great young core. I just think between the injury history and the age and the questionable team fit that Durant has been in other situations, I just don't see it working out for one of those various reasons. So I'm glad Detroit has kind of held their cards here.
Well, here's what I ask a lot of people. Do you feel like Detroit was playing well down the stretch, the end of the season and into the playoffs? You feel like they were playing good quality basketball?
Of course. Yep.
So here's what they essentially did. If you feel like they were playing good quality basketball down the stretch, in terms of their rotation, they essentially traded out Beasley, Schroeder, and Tim Hardaway Jr. for Jaden Ivey, Karis LeVert, and Duncan Robinson. Now, Fontecchio also is out, and I do think that that's important to talk about, because I do think that is a potential hole on the roster. There's two kind of positions that I think you could point to and be like, man, I wish they had a little more depth here. But in general, that's kind of what they did. And I realize J.I. is like the card that plays stronger than everybody else in that scenario, but he wasn't there last year. So whenever people try to tell me they're taking a step back or they're frustrated with the offense, like, I think they're going to be better to start the year, because that is who they were at the end of the season. And that was a team that ended up in the playoffs and gave the Knicks a run for their money. And that is truly who you traded out, along with a year of growth from Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren, another year in the system. Heck, another year for Cade Cunningham. Like, you're telling me he may not have another growth in terms of his three-point shooting, limiting turnovers, getting a little stronger, etc. So I am still very pleased. I'm very excited about where this team was. And as we've said multiple times now, I was very, very fine with the approach that Trajan Langdon took to the offseason.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on 94.9 FM in Grand Rapids, Michigan, 98.9 FM in Plainwell, Michigan, 99.5 FM in Lowell, Michigan, 105.1 FM in Kalamazoo, Michigan, 980 AM in Otsego, Michigan, and worldwide on Jethro FM. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh, executive producer, Deb Kay, producer, Rex. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.